Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us this morning. I'm John Greitzer. I'm the president of the Contra Costa County Historical Society. We're very glad to have you with us for our annual meeting and our first ever Zoom annual meeting. Obviously, we wish we could be with you in person this morning as we usually do for our annual meetings, but due to obvious circumstances, we are Zooming it to this time around. I was mentioning to our team here yesterday that before coronavirus hit, I had actually never even heard of Zoom. And now it's apparently just about the most widespread way for organizations large and small to do business. So it just goes to show you how quickly things can change and how good technology can be to try to solve difficult problems like this. Speaking of Zoom and technology, I want to, before we go any further, acknowledge and thank our technical Zoom consultants who are working behind the scenes to make this event possible and make sure that it flows smoothly and everything happens when it's supposed to. So thank you to Devin and Heather from the Burning Man organization who are serving as our technical consultants. We obviously could not have done this without you, so thank you so much. We have a great program for you today. We're going to be bringing you the kind of information that we usually do at our annual meetings. We'll be talking a little bit about the year in review and how things went for the society, what we were able to accomplish, some of the challenges. We'll talk about the financial picture, as we always do. And we have a fantastic guest presentation for you today. I know you're going to enjoy Karen Buchanan and her presentation on the history of Point Richmond. So it's that type of information consistent with what we always do at our annual meetings. But because we're doing this online, there's a couple of little process things that I need to go over before we move on with today's program. First of all, because there are so many of us here today, and we certainly appreciate all of you being here, because with this many people on board, we will have to mute everyone's microphones. So you won't be able to talk to us verbally as you ordinarily would at a typical annual meeting. But if there is some comment or something that you need to convey to us, if you're having a problem with some aspect of this, you can use the chat function in Zoom to type in a chat, and we will be monitoring the chat room, as they call it, so that you may be able to get your questions answered that way. If you're not familiar with Zoom, if you hold your mouse arrow point over the Zoom screen and you look up at the bottom, there's a line of different icons you can click on and you will see chat there. So that's how you can communicate if there's an urgent need to do so. And with that said, I will move on with our program for today. First up, looking at the year in review and how things went for the Historical Society. Well, from an organizational standpoint, I'd say our year probably went about like yours did under the COVID circumstances. We were not able to accomplish as many things, to do as many things as we ordinarily could in a typical year, because with the COVID situation and the county health guidelines, we actually were pretty much shut down for most of the year. Not entirely. There were a few little windows here and there when we were able to get some of our volunteers in, get a little bit of work done. So the year wasn't a total loss, but it certainly was not as productive a year as we typically have. Perhaps the most notable thing that we were able to accomplish in 2020 was we accepted the local history collection from the Contra Costa County Central Library in Pleasant Hill. Many of you may know that library is closed and they were disposing of their collection in various ways. And we were able to snag the local history collection, which for us is a very, very large collection. But we were happy to be able to bring that in rather than having it go to the basement in some archive in Sacramento. Better here than there. And we had a few of our volunteers in back in the spring and early summer, as many as the health guidelines would allow. to start processing that collection because it's very big. So our wonderful volunteers were going through it. They were starting to catalog what was in it, what was in field, what might be out of field, how we could catalog and archive all of those materials. But unfortunately, when the second wave of COVID happened and there was the stay-at-home order, our work pretty much stopped. So we were not able to get done as much as we would have liked. There's a lot of work ahead, but at least we made a head start on it. So that counts for something. And when they were in, our volunteers were able to do their usual great job of digitizing old photographs, maps, newspapers, working through some contributions we had from the old Contra Costa Times publishers. So here and there, we were able to accomplish some little things, but obviously not as much accomplished as we would have liked. We are going to be using the downtime to do some planning for the future. And we have some exciting planning work in store. And in just a few minutes, you'll be hearing from our new executive director, Mike McCarran, on how that will go and what kinds of plans will be made that will benefit the organization in the future. Although we were not able to accomplish what we wanted in terms of our archives, there was some big news for us that happened in terms of our personnel at the Historical Society. Two people who are very near and dear to us left our organization during 2020 for a couple of different reasons. And I just want to acknowledge those two and the tremendous contributions they made to us. They are Scott Saftler, who could not be with us today, and Priscilla Couden, who fortunately is with us today, and you'll be hearing from in just a minute. Let me just take a couple of minutes and talk about Scott. Scott was a member of our board of directors for about 10 years, and he was a volunteer with us for a lot longer than that, something on the order of 20 years. And most notably, he served as our technology chief. Scott made sure that our computers were running as well as they possibly could, that they were networked together, at least in a way that would enable us to get our critical work done. He oversaw other technology equipment like printers and scanners and email systems. And he really did it as a volunteer out of his commitment to the organization. Many is the day when I would come in for my volunteer shift and I would see Scott hammering away on a computer, installing some software, crawling underneath a table to work on wiring, and on at least one occasion crawling around up in the attic to put in some wiring for some additional computers. He really gave it everything he had with very limited resources and very limited staffing, just him. And Scott always did it cheerfully, and he really gave it 1,000%, and we would not be where we are without Scott. So I want to be sure to thank Scott on behalf of the Historical Society, and we wish him well in all his new endeavors. The other person who left us in a way was Priscilla Couden, our executive director from the past 11 years. Priscilla is with us today. I just can't say enough about the contribution that Priscilla made to our organization. She really helped us upgrade every aspect of our operations during the 11 years that she was here. She brought a whole new level of professionalism. She stayed up to date on the latest techniques in archiving and preservation of materials, and keeping the building at the right temperature and humidity to store things effectively. She hooked up with some renowned experts in archiving from around the country who gave us advice and counsel in those areas. She chased down a number of very, very important grants for us that enabled us to implement those kinds of measures. And during these previous 2 years, when I've been the president of the society, I've gotten to work very closely with Priscilla and have just been endlessly impressed at her professionalism and her dedication. So a very, very heartfelt thank you to Priscilla. And I'll turn it over now to Priscilla herself to offer her perspective on her time as executive director. Priscilla?
Hey, John, I've requested that Priscilla start her video and microphone, but I'm not getting a response from her.
Okay, well, I will, Priscilla?
Sorry, I thought it was being done automatically. I'll start again. Just 1 second. Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. I'm hoping each and every one of you is doing even better than you can be expected during this prolonged period of COVID. I'm happy you're all here today. In the fall Contra Costa County Historical Society newsletter, I shared my memories of my years as executive director. Today, I want especially to express my deepest appreciation to you and to others for their support through the years. You, the members and friends of CCCHS, are the backbone and lifeblood of the society. I wish I could shake each person's hand, as I have enjoyed meeting each of you in person or on the phone during my years as executive director, and I'm so thankful for your support. My thanks and appreciation also go to our many wonderful volunteers and interns over the years. They deserve special praise, for they are the ones who keep the organization's mission going on a day-to-day basis. I've prized them since day one of my tenure. I am thankful to all of them, but want to mention especially Margie, Jennifer, Janet, Jim, Cowrie, Betty, Diane, and Adria, as well as our intrepid archivist, Maxine, and our genealogist and board volunteer, Lisa Gorell. She has made my long-held goal a reality by putting our finding aid on the internet. I just can't say enough about our volunteers. Thank you, one and all. Profound thanks also go to the various foundations and entities who have supported us and contributed to the growth of the CCCHS over the years. In particular, I thank the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, the Dean and Margaret Lesher Foundation, the Martinez Community Foundation, the Chevron Federal Credit Union, the City of Martinez, and the Waters Moving Company. They have been the best. Of course, I also want to thank the members of all of the Society's Board of Directors who have supported me through the years and moved our organization both fiscally and procedurally forward to the place we hold in the nonprofit world today. I care for all of them, but I want to mention especially Beverly Lane, my first president and the genius behind the many of our exhibits over the years, Steve James, who put in so many hours wearing so many hats at the History Center each week, and particularly John Greitzer for his last 2 years as president of the Society. His solid leadership and detailed consideration have been incredibly helpful to me during those 2 years. In closing, I'd like to note how fortunate we are to have our new executive director, Mike McCarron. In this 70th anniversary year of the Contra Costa County Historical Society, I'm looking forward to sharing his vision of the future, which I am sure will be very bright. Thank you, John, and thank you all again. It's been great. I will miss you.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. Your contributions have just been invaluable. We appreciate everything that you've done for us. And we hope you'll come around as a visitor, a volunteer, whatever it might be. So don't disappear entirely. And Priscilla mentioned our new executive director, Mike McCarron. We are absolutely delighted to have Mike with us. He is the perfect person for us at this time to move us forward in the future. Mike has quite an extensive and impressive resume. He was executive director of the USS Hornet Sea, Air, and Space Museum over in Alameda. I don't know whether any of you have been to the Hornet, but if you have not, once things have reopened again, I strongly urge you to visit the Hornet. It is a fantastic and fascinating place, and they have their own historical archive over there. So Mike is well-versed in that area. And prior to that, Mike also held a number of positions at SFO, San Francisco International Airport, including executive director. So he has experience running organizations and nonprofits, both large and small. And we are just delighted to have him and his skill set with us. And he has already hit the ground running with some really important planning initiatives, which he'll be talking about. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mike McCarron.
Thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be with everyone today. Just to give a little more background of who I am, where I came from. As John said, I used to work at SFO and some other places like the Hornet, but I was born and raised in Sacramento, California, so I'm a Northern California guy through and through. I attended Sacramento State University and got my bachelor's degree in communications. And after graduation, I went in the Navy and then ended up in flight school. And I wanted to go see the world, so the Navy and its infinite wisdom assigned me to Moffett Field, 2 hours from my parents' front door. After 4 years of Moffett flying in the P-3 Orion, I was reassigned to Long Island at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, where I was an assistant professor of naval science. I left active duty and then was hired by San Francisco Airport, as John said, and I worked in a variety of jobs from emergency planning to airfield operations to terminal operations at the International Terminal, noise abatement, and then my last 10, 12 years as head of community affairs. And it was a wonderful experience doing that work at the airport. After I retired, I became a consultant working for the city of Melbourne, a major California utility, and I'm currently working also right now as a consultant with NBC News as an aviation expert. The last 4 years, as John said, I spent at the Hornet, first in communications and later as the executive director. And it's all given me a great eye-opening experience on how nonprofits fit in the community and what they should be and how they can be a better part of the community. That's kind of me in a nutshell. And what I'd like to do is kind of go over what I'm looking forward to doing for the next year, hopefully more than that, just 1 year, maybe a couple of years, and get us keep moving. And first off, I want to thank Priscilla for an outstanding foundation of work she built at the center for the past 10, 11 years. She has definitely set the bar very, very high, and I'm very honored and challenged to build upon her successes. And I also want to thank all the volunteers that I have met. Everyone has just been wonderful, dedicated, hardworking, and really good at their task at hand. It shows in everything they do. And finally, I want to thank John and the rest of the board for entrusting me with this organization. It's a great honor for me to have this position. Some of the things I want to do this year is to basically 3 major goals I have. The first is to develop and establish a 3-year strategic plan. I'd like to involve all the stakeholders. That includes the board members, the volunteers, and of course you, the membership, because I want to make sure we meet your needs as well when we define this plan. I want to be able to set out annual goals and milestones over the next 3 years that we can measure and make sure we're achieving, or if we need to redo an update, we can do that as well. And I want to update this plan every year if we can. The next thing, and it's kind of part of the same plan there, is to update and upgrade our IT infrastructure. As Priscilla Priscilla and John talked about Scott and his work in the IT system. He did a wonderful job, and we're very thankful for what he has there, but I'd like to see if we can really get moving more and integrate more systems and make sure we're the latest technology available. Part of that upgrade includes a relook at our website. It's a good system, but it's time to move on to a better system, and I think we're in that position to do that. And the third goal for me this year is our membership. I'd like to, over the next few months, begin a membership drive. About a month ago, I did a lot of mailings, a mass mailing for the fall appeal, and I said there's a million noting more what the letters were going out to. And then I was able to map out all of our membership by zip code, and I could see we had a great coverage in the 680-24 corridor, but not so much in the west part of the county. And so I'd like to see how we can reach out to that part of the county, expand our membership, and see what needs they need from us as a society. So I want to, again, work with all stakeholders and develop and implement a comprehensive plan to grow and expand our membership in underserved areas of our county. Now, one thing my time at the airport and the Navy, and certainly with the Hornet, taught me, all the plans in the world are great, but you can't really do this without any money. And so fortunately, what I've discovered very quickly is that the association is doing very well financially. as well as nonprofits can be doing, and certainly in a pandemic. But what's great is that we have a treasurer who's really been a great steward of those funds and that money. And so we can't do anything without the funds. And so I'll pass off now to Steve James, our treasurer, who's going to give you a financial update and let you know everything we're doing and how we're doing financially. Steve?
Thanks, Mike, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. What a challenging year this COVID situation has presented us. And it has really challenged small businesses. And we are a small business, no doubt about it. We've seen businesses, local businesses close. Some of our favorite restaurants have closed down, and it's really sad to see that. And so when COVID first started, when it first came up in March, we were very concerned of how was it going to affect us? How was it going to affect our revenue flow? And actually, we were very lucky because we don't rely totally or very little on actually walk-in traffic for our funds. So most of our revenue stream comes from outside sources. Let's see. Let me bring up this slideshow here and show you how we did this year. So, our total revenue was almost 178,000. We do get the stipend from the county. That's about 50,000. The grants, the Lesher Foundation is always very nice to us, and then we get smaller grants throughout the community, and then contributions, the money that comes from you folks, the folks that are watching today, which we very much appreciate. But you'll note here that the largest portion of our revenue is membership. It's 42%. And it's like, wow, that's really great. That's what you'd like to see, but there's some behind the curtains things going on here with our membership that we haven't totally told everybody about. Most people know, if you've been closely involved with us, but for over 10 years now, we've been in a relationship with the Chevron Federal Credit Union. So if you want to open up an account or get a loan with the credit union and you're not connected with Chevron in any way, you can become a member of our society, and that qualifies you to join the Chevron Federal Credit Union. And when I first got involved, this was like, wow, money, money from heaven here. This is easy money, and we were, getting like $10,000 a year from them. And then about 4 years ago, Chevron Federal Credit Union acquired Spectrum Credit Union, which is affiliated with the Bechtel Corporation. So just backing up a minute, when here in Contra Costa County, when we think Chevron, we think refinery, we think San Ramon. The Chevron Federal Credit Union is much larger than our county. They encompass all of the Chevron sites around the nation. So when they acquired Spectrum, it just ballooned. Specifically, and Spectrum has a relationship with a solar company that does solar loans. So now all of a sudden our $10,000 revenue stream from the credit union becomes 40, and then bigger again and bigger again. And So this last year, we got almost $63,000 from the credit union. 83% of our total membership revenue is from the credit union. Now, the scary thing about that and what we know is those people will not be repeat members. They live in New Jersey and Florida and Maryland and, Alabama. It truly does cover the whole country. And then the other thing that we're very aware of is this partnership could end at any time. We do have a great relationship with them. We meet with them frequently. It just enables us to be able to do things that we would have not been able to do, increase our computer capabilities, and just, many other things. So if you might consider, if you're looking for a loan or something, if you're a member of our organization, you can go to Chevron Credit Union and get a car loan, a solar loan, or just open up an account if you'd like. Moving on to the cost side, our expenses over the years pretty much stay flat. Our rent and utilities are the major portion of our expenses. I've said many times that we're just a climate-controlled storage facility, without the help of our volunteers. And a shout out to our volunteers. We can't do anything without their help. So, and the other major expenses are payroll and then lately our fire system. Now, the good news is we finally completed our setup and got approval through the Contra Costa County Fire Marshal that our system is approved, and yay. The bad news is it cost us $36,000 to get that in place. It started in 2018. We budgeted $15,000 for it. That was the bids we got on it, but little did we know that we had a drop-down window in our facility that was old and needed some TLC. Drop-down windows are expensive, so if you ever get involved in a situation where somebody says, "Oh, there's a drop-down window," run away. It cost you an arm and a leg to get it fixed. Next, I'd like to just move on to our Schwab account. I've mentioned in the past that we do have an investment account. And in 2015, we started having extra money via the credit union money. And we said, we just can't leave this amount of money set in our checking account. So we opened up a funded account in Charles Schwab. And to date, we have totally invested $95,000 in that initial account. And have gotten a nice little return on our investment, 32%. Then last year, or in 2019, one of our volunteers was going through some old newsletters, and they found where there had been an appeal out to our membership to start a building fund. And we actually got $6,245 donated to go to this building fund. Well, these were lean years, and that money just disappeared paying, the light bills. And so we thought, well, we said we were going to do that, and we have the money to do it now. So we opened up another account in Schwab, and that account has did an overall return of 38%. Very nice. And we were able to track down the people that donated the money, and surprisingly, some of them were still with us, and we were able to thank them and tell them what we'd done and achieved here. So that was very nice. Our other channel as challenge, as Mike has mentioned, we have some goals looking ahead of us, and this money here, in this planning, how do we want to use it? So it'll be interesting to see how all that works out, and I just want to assure everybody that's out there that we take great pride in investing and using your money to keep our archive safe, keep it accessible, and open to the public. So if anybody has any questions, they can use the chat room, they can use the Q&A, or they can send us an email to info@CoCo history, and I'd love to get back to you. I love talking about money, so if you got a question, I'd love to talk to you about it. So moving forward here, see if I can get there. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker. I had the pleasure of meeting her and giving her a tour of our facility. The thing that was very apparent to me that she is very passionate about history and very knowledgeable about not just the Richmond and Point Richmond area, but about a lot of things. San Francisco. She has a broad background of working locally, and you may have seen in our newsletter it showed all the organizations that she volunteers for. So she has endless energy. So please help me welcome Karen Buchanan.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very, very much for that wonderful welcoming. I will now hit my screen share. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, excellent. All right, so hello everybody. I'm Karen Buchanan, owner of Urban History Hikes, and I'll be your entertainment for the afternoon. Today I'll be presenting colorful characters of Point Richmond history. All right, so let's move to our next slide. Very first slide, hold on. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Here's a portion of the 1894 landowner's map showing the Potrero of San Pablo as an island separated from the mainland by extensive marshlands with tidal sloughs connecting San Pablo Bay with San Francisco Bay. I bet you're all wondering how Richmond got its name. Richmond, California was named by Edmund Randolph, who was born in Virginia's Richmond, which in turn was named after Richmond, England. Edmund Randolph had represented the San Francisco Bay Area in the first seating of the California State Legislature in 1849. When a federal surveying party was mapping the San Francisco Bay, Edmund Randolph decided that the West Coast needed a Richmond too. The name Point Richmond first appeared on the 1854 U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey map, which was later used in selecting the endpoint of the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad. Last December, Mayor Tom Butt of Richmond received a letter from the Baroness Harris of Richmond, North Yorkshire, England. The Baroness is organizing the 950th celebration of the original Richmond's founding in 1071, established by the Normans when they built a castle on Riche Mont, or Strong Hill. Now there are more than 60 towns and cities and over 100 places worldwide named Richmond. Baroness Harris is contacting town halls, historic societies, and libraries of cities named Richmond worldwide in the hope that they will help with their celebration. She intends to mount an exhibition with as many Richmonds of the world as possible and is asking for photos, flags, pennants, and any information on when our Richmond was founded and why it was so named. I happen to serve on the board of the Richmond Museum Association, and the museum is contributing a 1955 banner from the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of our Richmond on August 7th, 1905. Okay, so now we are going to advance to the next slide. All right, hold on. There we go. Dr. Jacob Tewksbury was born in Maine in 1814 and practiced medicine for many years in Argentina, where he married the former Emily Sutton in 1848. Drawn by the gold rush, they moved to San Francisco in 1849 and then to Contra Costa County in the 1860s. Dr. Tewksbury retired from the medical profession and when he realized it would be more lucrative to sew up land than to sew up people. Of all the early settlers of Contra Costa County, Dr. Tewksbury acquired more land. Hold on a second, please. He acquired more land than anyone else, eventually totaling 2,546 acres, making Emily Tewksbury a very wealthy widow when the good doctor died in 1878. Although most of his acquired land was marshland, the enterprising doctor constructed dikes, one at the mouth of the San Pablo Bay and one at Ellis Landing, effectively cutting off what had been a shipping channel at high tide. Soil washing down from the hills to the east deposited silt and gradually built up land, turning the Point Richmond area from an island into a peninsula. All right, now we'll talk about John Nichol. John Nichol was born to Scottish parents in Ireland in 1822 and emigrated to California in the 1850s. He purchased 200 acres of Rancho San Pablo land around 1859, which he developed into a ranch near today's Richmond Civic Center. John Nichol later procured 150 acres of land in the Point Richmond area, and while living on his ranch, he became close personal friends with Klaus Spreckels of C&H Sugar fame. Spreckels was one of the investors in the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad, which was formed to compete with the monopoly position of the Southern Pacific Railroad. In 1897, John Nichol sold 57 acres of his Point Richmond land for $80,000 to the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad, which was then bought out by the Santa Fe Railway Company. With the proceeds from the sale, John Nichol bought up land on the opposite side of the Potrero, preparing for the inevitable boom that the railroad terminal would bring to the lands lying along the railroad right-of-way. John Nichol is credited as being the founding father of Point Richmond and was an enthusiastic civic booster. He built the first city hall of Richmond at 210 Washington Avenue in Point Richmond in 1909, and the building is still there today. Okay, next we will talk about, oops, sorry, need to transfer back. There we go, oops, sorry. We are having a slide problem. Previous. And sorry about that, folks. Technical difficulties. Here we are. Here we have Augustin Macdonald's vision. In November of 1895, Oakland businessman Augustin Macdonald decided to go duck hunting in the marshlands near the Potrero of San Pablo. Well, the ducks weren't flying that day, so he decided to go for a hike. When he reached the top of the hill, now known as Nichol Knob, he beheld the amazing view stretching from Mount Tamalpais to the Berkeley Hills, with San Francisco seemingly just across the way. He consulted government maps and surveys, which confirmed a 65-foot deep water port at the only point on the east side of San Francisco Bay where land and navigable water would meet. He quickly realized the economic potential of what lay before him, knowing that a railroad carrying freight to San Francisco was pulling its cars 24 miles farther than necessary. If the point of land below him turned into a railroad terminal, That would save the railroad an immense amount of money. Macdonald presented his idea to Collis P. Huntington of Southern Pacific. Huntington, unfortunately, was embroiled in numerous lawsuits at the time and had to leave the state, so he failed to act on Macdonald's suggestion. However, the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad jumped at the opportunity to overcome the SP monopoly. Now we will go back to that tunnel shot. Oops. All right. So the railroad soon built a tunnel through the hillside. In about 1899, they started construction. And then a causeway was built along the shoreline to make Point Richmond the western terminus of their rail line. On July 3rd, 1900, the first eastbound passengers disembarked from the ferry, the Ocean Wave, and boarded a train bound for Chicago. The Santa Fe Railway Company built their train sheds at the foot of what is now Barrett Avenue and A, B, and C streets. Augustin Macdonald was a wily businessman with insider knowledge of the coming railroad. He and his associates bought the 550-acre George Barrett farm for far less than it was worth, and then subdivided it into 5,000 lots. Macdonald later sold off his holdings at a handsome profit and retired to Oakland to live in a fabulous mansion. Okay, next slide. The Critchett Hotel. In 1900, when the Santa Fe Railroad first started train service to Point Richmond, there was nothing in town but a scattering of abandoned cabooses and tents for the railroad workers to live in. John Nickel offered free land to a talented builder named Frank Critchett to build a first-class mechanics hotel on a dusty, hastily carved out street called Washington Avenue. Critchett accepted. He moved with his wife Martha and their 3 boys into a tent at the building site. And now we will talk about Martha. Hold on. Oops, hold on. Working with 2 screens here. And sorry for the delay. There we go. Martha Critchett was a short, stocky, gregarious woman who loved laughter, gaiety, and good company. Martha lived in primitive tent conditions during the fall of 1900 while the hotel was being built, but endured the hardship with true pioneer spirit. When the hotel was finished that winter, Martha decided to celebrate its grand opening with a festive tea party. Being in an expansive mood, she decided it was time to meet all the wives of the railroad workers. So she put out an open invitation to all the ladies in town to come to the new hotel for an afternoon tea party. She baked tea cakes and cookies, laid out her best linens, polished up her silverware, and set out her finest china teacups. Martha and her best friend, Mrs. Lyman Noggle, wife of the village postmaster, grocer, and editor of the local newspaper, sat and waited for the other guests to arrive. They waited and waited and waited and waited. And they later realized that they were the only women in town. And here we have the ghost of Martha Critchett still waiting after 120 years. And now let's move on. Okay, the Pacific Coast Oil Refinery. In 1900, John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil bought out Pacific Coast Oil Company of San Francisco and expanded Pacific Coast's Richmond refinery with the purchase of 600 acres of previously underwater land from Emily Tewksbury for $68,000. The refinery first started producing oil in July of 1902, the first products being kerosene for lighting and fuel oil for heating. Several cottages were built on the nearby hillsides for refinery workers, including the cute little 1905 cottage that I live in today. And now we shall meet a very interesting character named Professor Botts and his wondrous flying machine. In the winter of 1900, about the same time the Critchett Hotel opened, a man identifying himself as Professor Robert H. Botts came to Point Richmond, set up a workshop on Nickel Knob, and announced grandiose plans to build a flying machine. He obtained 2 patents, one for a light airship steam engine and one for an aluminum steam boiler. His design, including a lifting device of 2 horizontal propellers located in the top center of the airship to be driven in opposite directions at a high rate of speed. There would also be a vertical driving propeller at the stern, a rudder for steering, a gas bag, a parachute, and a glider for safety. In 1902, Professor Botts built a model of his airship and began selling shares in the world's aerial navigation and construction company. He had equally grandiose dreams of building 2 airships by that summer and organizing a scientific expedition to the North Pole. He would bring along motion picture cameras and a Marconi wireless telegraph system, and then return triumphantly via Greenland, New York, and St. Louis, just in time to show off his magnificent feat at the 1903 World's Fair. On May 26, 1902, Professor Botts gave a practical demonstration of his steam engine using compressed air from the nearby Santa Fe rail yards. In August of that year, he displayed his engine, boiler, and a model of the airship at the Richmond Fiesta and Carnival. There was much excitement built up about Professor Botts' amazing airship. But on the day of the trial flight, the flying machine was taken to the top of Nickel Knob with an eager crowd of investors and townspeople gathered to watch. And there they are. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind caught the life craft and smashed it to smithereens on the steep slopes of Nickel Knob. His dreams literally shattered. Professor Botts left town, never to be heard from again. Sigh. Now we shall learn about C.L. Cofer, Pseudoscientist Extraordinaire. In 1911, pseudoscientist named C.L. Cofer came to Point Richmond and managed to convince John Nickel to put his faith in Cofer's terrestrial wave detector, which predicted vast deposits of oil under Nickel's property in Point Richmond. Cofer claimed that there were great belts of blue rock, extensive dikes of yellow and blue shale, and a very large and defined gas dome under Nickel Knob. John Nickel bought it and paid C.L. Cofer the handsome sum of $50 a day to receive daily glowing test results from Cofer's marvelous device, which was a series of electrical batteries strapped tightly around his body with an indicating instrument of his own invention. A company was formed to drill for oil, and soon an oil derrick appeared on Richmond Avenue near the Santa Fe Railroad tracks. They drilled through 250 feet of solid rock and kept drilling. Finally, in November of 2012, did I say 2012? I meant 1912. After over a year of drilling, the well reached a depth of 1,242 feet, but they found nothing but water, which started gushing out at a rate of 250,000 gallons a day. C.L. Cofer skipped town on the next train, and John Nickel realized he'd been had. Nickel decided to donate the oil well land to the city of Richmond, which passed bonds to build a new municipal natatorium. On September 15th, 1925, the plunge opened with great pomp and circumstance, a celebration organized by the Women's Westside Improvement Club. Okay, now we will learn about Kate Reardon and the Hotel Mac. This grand brick building was originally built in 1911 by Kate Reardon, a young female Irish immigrant whose claim to fame was being the first woman to register to vote in Contra Costa County. It was originally called the Colonial Hotel and became a popular gathering place for the community. In 1914, Kate Reardon married a fellow Irish immigrant named James Pope, who worked at the nearby Standard Oil refinery. The couple raised 7 children in the hotel and then sold it in 1930 to retire to a dairy farm. The buyer was M.V. McAfee, the former general manager of the Claremont Resort, who changed the name to the Hotel Mac after himself. Alrighty. Now we will learn about our beloved Indian statue. The Women's West Side Improvement Club was established in 1908 by a group of enterprising women from the west side of Richmond who were dedicated to the civic betterment of Point Richmond. The Women's Westside Improvement Club still meets regularly and is one of the oldest continually active women's clubs in California. It was one of the first civic organizations I joined when I moved to Point Richmond in 2015, and I was quickly appointed their secretary, a position I served for 2 years. The Women's Westside Improvement Club has been cleaning up the town for the past 113 years. One of their first civic projects was to provide a public drinking fountain that could accommodate horses, dogs, and humans. They ordered an Indian statue out of a catalog and unveiled the statue and water fountain with a grand ceremony in 1909. One night in 1943, as our local urban legend has it, a local truck driver left one of the numerous bars in the Point and backed into the fountain, knocking the statue to the ground. Since World War II was raging and scrap metal was precious, the statue was melted down and recycled for the war effort. The current statue was paid for by funds raised by local residents and businesses through a commemorative brick sale. The statue was sculpted by artist Kirk St. Marr, modified from the original as it appeared in historic photos. The statue is dedicated to the original Huichin people and Ohlone tribelet who inhabited the Point Richmond area for over 5,000 years. Now, hold on, there we go. Right, let's hear about Joel Beck. One of Point Richmond's most beloved eccentric characters was artist Joel Beck. He was one of the first, if not the first, underground comic artist in the early 1960s. He dropped out of high school and plied his trade, submitting cartoons to UC Berkeley's humor magazine, The Pelican. The editors just assumed he was a Cal student, but he never actually matriculated at UC Berkeley. He lived surreptitiously in a converted closet in a Berkeley dorm room. In the mid-60s, he authored 3 full-length satirical underground comic books, which today would be called graphic novels. One of them spoofed Berkeley's free speech movement, which wasn't exactly well received by the self-serious youth activists. His cartoons were also featured in the underground newspaper, the Berkeley Barb. Joel Beck was well known around the Point and liked to hang out on the benches by the Indian statue. He was a regular at many of the Point's watering holes where he would trade drawings for food and drink, especially drink, since he was quite fond of the bottle. He had been sickly as a child with chronic tuberculosis, and in his later years lived in a room upstairs in the building that now houses the Up and Under Pub and Grill. Sadly, he succumbed to a combination of tuberculosis and alcoholism and died in his room in 1999. It is said that the ghost of Joel Beck still haunts the pub to this day. Employees have reported strange happenings with the electrical systems, as if Joel Beck is making his presence known by pulling pranks on them. Okay, now, aha, another colorful character, Karen Buchanan. One of Point Richmond's most colorful characters in modern history is Karen Buchanan, who breezed into town in July 2015 as a refugee from Southern Marin. She came to Point Richmond to reinvent her life after a divorce. She rolled up her sleeves, and they're very short, as you can see, and quickly established herself as a dedicated civic volunteer, joining a plethora of local organizations. San Francisco native, Karen was a toddler in the summer of love and went from the streets of the Haight-Ashbury to the marble halls of Congress, serving as a United States Senate page in the summer of 1981. She had the privilege of meeting and serving the 46th President of the United States when he was the junior senator from Delaware. At age 19, she dropped out of college and became a stand-up comedian, working the open mic auditions in San Francisco comedy clubs for 5 years. At age 24, she settled down, got married, and had a baby, raising a beautiful, talented, and accomplished daughter named Laurel, who just moved to Washington, D.C. on December 31st to open a branch office for her company, Local Initiative Support Corporation. Laurel is the 3rd generation of Buchanan women to live and work in the nation's capital. All right, and that brings our slideshow to a close. So I'm available for any questions, and I will now turn it back over to John for extra words. Thank you so much.
Karen, thank you. That was terrific. And Point Richmond certainly had its share of eccentric characters, didn't it?
Yes, indeed.
I wonder if folks become eccentric once they get there, or if eccentric folks seek out places like Point Richmond.
That's
Maybe
a,
some of both.
that's a kind of chicken and the egg kind of question.
Right, exactly. I loved the pseudoscience extraordinaire, and I loved Professor Potts and his wondrous flying machine, which obviously wasn't too wondrous after all. A couple of them went slinking out of town. So that was just very, very entertaining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that presentation. We do have some time for some questions. If anyone would like to ask Karen some follow-up questions about her presentation on Point Richmond, you can use the Q&A function in Zoom. And again, if you mouse over your Zoom screen and look at the bottom, on my screen right next to the chat, there is a thing labeled Q&A. So if you click on Q&A and type your question in there, we will field your questions and call them out for Karen.
Oh, and I'm kind of looking at the chat window, and I see that Carol Thompson asked, any tidbits on the wigwags? And yes, actually, I was the co-chair of the wigwag celebration committee. We hired a gentleman, a hobbyist, who restored the wigwags to functioning, glory. And in July of 2019, we had a special celebration for the wigwags.
And what are the wigwags?
Oh, what are the wigwags? The wigwags are the what's believed to be the only remaining electronic train signals, crossing signals in existence in North America. They are on a base of concrete base with black and white chevron stripes. And they have a flag that waves ding, ding, ding when a train is coming. And
Gotcha.
they were replaced in 2003 by modern crossing arms by BNSF Railway. And through a concerted effort of the community, they were allowed to remain in place, despite the redundancy of the modern crossing arms.
Gotcha. Very good. Thank you. We have a question from Richard Schwartz, who wants to know, do you have any new information on the theater run by M.B. Curtis in Point Richmond? Does that sound familiar?
Oh, I have a book about M.B. Curtis. He was the amazing and well-renowned stage actor in the early 20th century. And he actually personally funded the lighting of the Statue of Liberty. But I don't know about a theater that he may have owned in Point Richmond. We have the Point Theater, which was a vaudeville theater that opened in 1914. And went through a series of changes in ownership. It was at some time a revival church, a workout gym, and then several restaurants. And it's currently Moss's Taqueria. But I have never heard of any theater run by M.B. Curtis.
All righty, thanks for that. We have a question from our esteemed board member, John Mercurio, who wants to know, do you lead history walks in Point Richmond?
Oh boy, do I. I actually have been leading urban history hikes for over 10 years, all over the Bay Area, in historic neighborhoods of San Francisco, in Marin County. I even do lead hikes up to top of Mount Tam, up the Dipsy Stairs, and all over Point Richmond, downtown Richmond, the Marina Bay World War II home front. For at least 3 years, I've co-led home front history hikes with Supervisor John Joya on the Rosie Day. So yes, we do that. I have a meetup group called Urban History Hikes, and I'm setting up a business in 2021 called Urban History Hikes. And I'm developing a website where information about my upcoming hikes can be done. Of course, I've had to go on hiatus for the pandemic when we can't really organize live events, but I was able to do a haunted Halloween history hike, and that was the fourth in this annual. And as you see from that slide of the ghost, I conscripted some local neighbors to dress up in maskers costumes and pretend to be historic ghosts. So yes, I do history hikes.
Yes, and I thanks for that. And I would note that that ghost of Martha Pritchard, I believe, was looking pretty impatient there. So
yes, exactly.
she'd been hanging around for a long time.
Yes.
Okay, we have a question from Daniel O'Connell, who wants to know, what was the name of the company that you mentioned, something like ABC? It was a few slides before the Pacific Oil Refinery. Do you recall what company that was?
Oh, the Pacific Coast Oil Company, the precursor to Standard Oils. They were a small oil company established in San Francisco in the late 1890s, and they had actually established the refinery a couple of years before John D. Rockefeller came out scouting for a West Coast refinery for his Standard Oil operations.
Ah, okay, very good. Question from Sean Gilbert. What do you know about suffragists from the Richmond area? Have you done much research into women's suffrage in that area?
Actually, I co-hosted a segment of the Maskers Theater's December 1st live stream fundraiser. And my research on suffragettes in Contra Costa County was limited to a pamphlet I had grabbed when Steve James gave me the tour of your archives on November 14th. So yes, there is a definite rich contribution of Contra Costa County to women's suffrage, and we actually passed the women's right to vote about in the early teens. I think it was 1912. But further research should be done, and if the archives are ever open to the public, you can go in and pick up one of those pamphlets and read about it yourself.
Okay, very good. Rich Sandvik asks, do you have any info on the history of the Richmond plunge? I used to swim there as a child growing up in Richmond. And I have another old friend who used to talk about the Richmond plunge. I know what it is, but I don't know much about it. Are you familiar with that at all?
The plunge is the municipal natatorium that was in that slide, built on the site of John Nichols' failed oil digging operation. So yeah, the plunge has a wonderful history. There's actually a little booklet about the history of the plunge that we sell. I'm also a docent at the Point Richmond History Museum, the little cute little building on Washington, 139.5 Washington Avenue in downtown Point Richmond. And we sell a pamphlet for about $1, and you can read all about the plunge. It's got a really interesting history. It had to close in the early 2000s because of seismic safety. And it took about 9 years for the citizenry to raise the funds to restore it. And it's been open since 2010. And it's a miracle of modern, green energy. It's ventilated by actual louvers in the windows and the skylights. And it uses ultraviolet light to clean the water. And it's a natural saline type of water. They don't use any chlorine or bromine.
Sounds like kind of like the old Sutro baths in San Francisco.
Exactly. Or the old Fleischacker pool out there by the zoo.
Right, fascinating. Thanks for that. Beverly Lane, also of our board of directors, asks if you can tell us anything more about Augustin Macdonald. She notes that she thinks he was involved in incorporating the city of Richmond. And she also wants to know if you know how long the Santa Fe ran the train to the ferry out there. So specific questions there.
Yeah, okay, Augustin, his name was Augustin Macdonald, and that's a small d. It was Macdonald with a small d. And so the street, one of the main drags of Richmond is small d Macdonald. So that for those grammar police officers out there, that's one thing you can always be a stickler for. All right. I don't know a lot about Augustin Macdonald other than he had friends in high places, and he could pick up the phone and call Collis P. Huntington, of the big.
Well, that's pretty good. That counts for something.
Yeah, and so he had he was a real estate entrepreneur from Oakland, and I don't really know much more about him because I was focused narrowly on how he had discovered the economic potential of Point Richmond. The other question was about
if you know how long the Santa Fe Railroad ran the train out to the ferry.
That's a good question, because I want to do further research on that, and you would probably have to delve into the railroad history of BNSF, and I do believe BNSF might have like a historian on staff that perhaps you could contact and learn more about that, because I know at some point there was a devastating fire on the docks there, because you can see the burned out timbers when you walk out to that fishing pier over there at Ferry Point. But I don't, that's a gap in my knowledge that I need to fill.
Okay, thanks. Carol Thompson sends along a comment. Those hikes sound fabulous. And she's glad that you are bringing history to life out there in Point Richmond. So thanks for that. Carol Jensen, one of our longtime Historical Society members, asks, any insights as to Point Richmond and the Panama Pacific International Exhibition of 1915, a historical event that we've paid some attention to that in the past from a county-wide standpoint, but do you know, is there anything relating to that in Point Richmond that you've come across?
I don't think that, not that I'm aware of, but I do have a wonderful book that came out when they were celebrating the 100th anniversary in 2015. Hold on, let me just grab this book.
Sure. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. That was quite an event.
This is the definitive history. It's called San Francisco's Jewel City, the Panama Pacific International Exposition of 1915 by Laura Ackley. And she is like an incredible historian. She's part of the San Francisco Historical Society. And I attended many of the events in 2015 that surrounded that history. Now, one interesting fact, Sausalito is another historic railroad town with a ferry railroad connection, as is Point Richmond. And so both towns kind of developed around railroads and ferries. And Sausalito had a native son who was actually the sculptor of a lot of the ornamentation, the temporary ornamentation of the Panama Pacific Exposition. And he when the fair was disbanded and everything was being demolished, he saved the fountain and two of the elephants that held light standards throughout the festival grounds. And he transported them on a barge over to Sausalito and installed them in Viña del Mar Park on the Sausalito waterfront, and that they are still there today in all their glory. They had to be, in the 30s, that paper mache, the temporary paper mache managed to stay strong for 20 years, but they started to crumble in 1935. So they made a concrete casting, so they are cement elephants today. So there's a little factoid for you. And that's a little tidbit from my Sausalito history hike.
Okay, fascinating. Daniel O'Connell has a follow-up question about the plunge and the water source, and you covered some of this in your presentation. Daniel says, you mentioned that the drill site, the pseudoscientific drill site, I guess, produced 250,000 gallons of water a day. Yes. And he asks, was that water the source of the plunge?
I do believe in the beginning, because they had hit a vast artesian well underground. And so I think in the early days that water was used. And I don't know currently what the source of the water is. Okay.
And question from Suzanne Statler. She asks, as the shipyards opened during World War II, these were a major part of Richmond's history, generally the city of Richmond, the Kaiser shipyards. She asks if you know anything about the impact of that on Point Richmond, whether it contributed to population growth or architecture or demographics in Point Richmond itself.
That's a good question. And I think, a visit to the Rosie the Riveter World War II National Historical Site might give you some more answers on the demographic shifts and the population changes. We all know that, Richmond was a sleepy little industrial town of about 23,000 in 1940. And within a year and a half, it ballooned to about 110,000 people. And so citywide, there had to have been a significant impact on all the city infrastructure, housing, and everything else, including Point Richmond.
Right. And the Rosie the Riveter National Historic Park is a fantastic place. So if anyone who's with us today has not been there yet, I'm guessing most of you have, but if you have not been there yet, what a great, great place. Well, that exhausts, whoops, we've got an additional question. Here we go. Richard Schwartz asks, can you go over again how the area was silted to make Point Richmond not an island, and what years did that occur? Do you know?
Yes, that would have been, because Tewksbury was acquiring all that land, after the 1894 land suit was settled, the 27-year land suit. So it would be probably in those years between like 1894 to 1900. And because when Standard Oil came along, Emily Tewksbury sold those 600 acres of previously underwater land. And geomorphologically speaking, the lands forms of that make up Richmond, moving up into the hills of the San Pablo Ridge, that's known as an alluvial plain. And alluvial fans are formed by sediments flowing down waterways. And the watershed of the San Pablo Creek and the Wildcat Creek flow down and deposit sediment into the marshes. And that takes, probably centuries to build up real land, but that was helped along and speeded up by Jacob Tewksbury building dikes. So that created some structure for the silt to build up against.
Okay, thanks for that. Mary Knox mentions that a charming modern day phenomenon in Point Richmond is the ferry houses built along Washington Avenue. She asks, do you know if the Point Richmond Historical Society is archiving any photos of them?
That's a good question, and probably one better asked of Gary Shows, who is our archivist of photographs for the Point Richmond History Association. He's also the editor of our newsletter at this point in time. And I do know a movie an independent film was made called Little Point Richmond, and it was released last year on probably a virtual film festival circuit. But as far as documenting I'm sure several people have taken photos, and that would be a good idea to get them cataloged and kept for posterity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Well, that seems to have exhausted our questions. So Karen, thank you once again for a really, really great presentation. Some very, very colorful history over there in Point Richmond. You covered a lot of folks who were very industrious, very productive, some who were mysterious, some who were a little wacky, and it all made for a really great presentation. So thank you so much again.
Thank you
for providing this. And you've, as I mentioned to you the other day, you've set a very high bar for future historical presentations that we'll have at future annual meetings to even meet that, let alone exceed it. So thank you very much.
Thanks. It was my absolute pleasure to entertain you this afternoon. Thanks.
Great. Thanks again. Well, that completes our program for today. I want to thank all of you again for being willing to Zoom with us. As I said at the outset, obviously it's not the same as being there in person, but these days it's the best we can do. So thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank Karen Buchanan again for her terrific presentation. Also, one more shout out to Devin and Heather from Burning Man, who made all of this go so smoothly behind the scenes. Devin and Heather, thanks so much for your efforts. Thanks to Priscilla and to Scott Saftler for their long years of contributions to the Historical Society and the impact that they both have had on the preservation of local history. I also want to thank Tara Weber, one of our board members, who really got the planning for this event rolling. Tara could not be with us today, unfortunately, but she was largely responsible for the initial planning to get this Zoom event rolling. So a big thank you to Tara as well. And I'll close just by mentioning that this year is our 70th birthday. We were created in 1951 by Judge A.F. Bray, Louis Stein, and a whole committee of like-minded citizens who are interested in local history. So we're now 70 years old, and we are hoping that at some point later this year, if the coast is clear and we can resume in-person events, that we can have some kind of a celebratory event to mark our 70th birthday. So watch our website in the months ahead for that. And hopefully we can keep going strong for another 70 years and beyond. And so with that, thanks once again, one and all, for participating. We appreciate your being a part of our Historical Society, and stay in touch, and thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.